Thank you, Jürgen. It's a great pleasure to be here, and thank you to the previous speakers. I would like to just say to Andrew, I'm delighted that the student made the right choice, but to study physics in Manchester, she would have needed higher grades than to get into Oxford. So obviously she achieved them. What I would like to do in just a few minutes, because I'm aware we want to have time for questions, is briefly consider why do we need this review, why now, what's the audience, what are the key messages, and what next? And each one will be very brief. But I do want to begin by also extending my thanks for the extensive work that's been undertaken in writing this report. It's no easy task to capture strengths in science and technology, and I'll come back to that in a moment. The report has breadth and depth, but I would commend it particularly for pinning its nails to the mast and going for 4 areas. It would have been very, very easy to describe 20 or 30 or 50 strengths in the Northwest, and to choose just 4 was a brave and, in my view, a very sensible thing to do. If I could only persuade my colleagues in the university to stick to 4. We're down to 5 or 6 now, but and interestingly, 4 of them completely match with those in the report, which is reassuring. So why is this needed? We need it to inform many, and I'll talk about the audiences in a moment, of the strengths and the opportunities in the Northwest. But I think it's also important that we recognise the challenges and the barriers. And it's not good enough to just say, we're quite good at this, we're nationally good at this. We need to be globally good and globally the best. And in some of those areas we are. My predecessor, Alan Gilbert, often said that the best thing that the University of Manchester could do for the region is to be globally competitive, and that is true. We don't want to be competing with the South East. We want to be competing with the best universities across the world. And the areas identified in the report are indeed of that standing. It's really important that we try to demonstrate the economic and social benefit of investment into science and technology. It's an extremely difficult thing to do. It's careers of many people in trying to demonstrate that, including my colleague Luke Georgia, who's here from the university. Reasonable estimates are that there can be a 20 to 50% payback, but capturing those payoffs is extremely difficult and will be, I think, become one of the next steps that we need to take forward. We've had a period of extremely difficult economic conditions. We like to think cautiously that we're moving on from that. But what better time than now to look at where we should be investing? And when I say we, I don't mean just George Osborne, though we do look at him, obviously. And I don't just mean companies. I mean we in the Northwest. And also, we need to be attracting inward investment from overseas. One example we gave to George Osborne today when he came to do the topping out ceremony of the National Graphene Institute was a Chinese company, Bluestone Global Technology, that is going to put its global European headquarters in Manchester. The next step is to try to get them to move manufacturing here. That is far more important than moving companies from other parts of the country, and certainly just moving them around the region. Why now? Well, aside from the timeliness of perhaps growth in the economy again, there have been quite a few recent reports. David Willits alluded to the report done by Andrew Whitty, and I was a member of that group, and it was looking at science and universities as part of future economic growth. And the most difficult and the most controversial part of that report, for any of you who've seen it, were a series of maps at the back with dots showing strengths. Just about everything about the maps could be challenged, and in some cases was actually wrong. They nevertheless published them saying it's the best we've got, but it was a real illustration that we simply do not have reliable maps of strengths in science and technology that cover not only universities, but other research institutes, businesses, from discovery, R&D, through to manufacturing and technologies. It's lacking across the country. Yesterday I was at the Council of Science and Technology, and we spent 2 hours debating how we could get a landscape of strengths across the UK. We couldn't even agree on the taxonomy. How would we begin? Would we count physics and engineering, or would we do it more in the outcomes, such as materials and energy, as we have done here? There is nothing in the UK that shows where the strengths are. Unless we have that, how can we make arguments about where to invest, and how can we start to consider the payback? Another report by a great Mancunian that will be coming out later this year, Jim O'Neill, who I'm pleased to say is now a professor at the University of Manchester. I'm not quite sure if he knows what he's going to do about being a professor at the university, but I'm sure we'll find something for him. He's looking at growth outside the southeast. It's very, very easy for us in the northwest to complain about investment in the southeast. I think it's time, as others have said, instead to look at the advantages of the northwest and to partner with the southeast and to gain maximum benefit. One outcome from Andrew Whitty's reports, he started out looking for clusters of strengths across the UK, and he ended up saying the UK itself should be treated as a cluster. And while we must speak of the strengths of the Northwest, we must also think about how we fit in with the strengths across the United Kingdom. Both of those, one report is out, another one will be coming out, but there are many, many attempts at the moment to look at how we get a more balanced growth. Some will have seen this in the press and the media recently. The UK is unusual in a prosperous country where its second city, Manchester, is barely a quarter the size of the first city. That's most unusual, and it's something that we need to work to change. So then what's the audience? And we agreed at an NWBLT meeting recently that actually the first audience was us, the members of the Northwest Business Leadership Team. There were some parts of the report that even surprised us. I think we were surprised it came out so very clearly in those 4 areas without question. Then, of course, there are people in the region who need to know, need to talk about what it is that's strong about Manchester. It needs to be a message to businesses looking to locate here, a message to government and policymakers, but as Andrew alluded to, it also needs to be a message to global audiences. I can't help, given the interest that Jürgen alluded to, but mention it also needs to be a message to the wider public. It is right we're in Mosey, in spite of the great background noise. We're fortunate in the Northwest to have a number of science museums. We're also fortunate, as Andrew mentioned, to have Jodrell Bank Discovery Centre, which will soon be doubling in size. And at risk of overselling, there's no likelihood of that, stargazing coming from Jodrell Bank each January has really helped to put it on the map. So the message about what we're good at, about exciting future careers for young people in the Northwest, has to be around the great strengths. And it's amazing looking around here, seeing quite a number of things I'm very familiar with, but the other thing that struck me was how many names are names within my university. The Whitworth Hall, a great benefactor. The John Owens Building, the Christie Building. These were great businessmen of the past who supported science and technology and universities across the region. The messages are there for you to see. I come back to the fact that I think it's important that those 4 areas were selected. It's important that they build not only on current strengths, but also on past history. As you've heard, Alan Turing, of course, was here. The Christie Hospital, one of the premier cancer hospitals, and of course, it's where Rutherford split the atom, the very birth of nuclear industry. Many of them reflect partnerships. And to give you an example that's been mentioned briefly, in cancer, a partnership not only at Manchester, but also at other universities, with Cancer Research UK, with AstraZeneca, and with a number of other companies. It's also important that these 4 link to the government's 8 great technologies. I asked why there are 8. I was told it's because it rhymes with great, but nevertheless it is used repeatedly to identify the strengths of technologies in the United Kingdom, and the 4 that we have identified in the Northwest map onto those. So the report also talks about infrastructure, skills and ecosystems. One area that hasn't been addressed yet is the value of science parks in the region. Thornton, Daresbury, Westlakes, Manchester Science Park, and of course Alderley Park. It's essential that we join them up and let them thrive collaboratively rather than in competition. And finally, briefly, what next? We have the report, we talked a little bit about the what next. We need to now promote it, to tell people about what's in it, and make sure they realise the potential. We need to follow up in more depth in some of the areas. We need to look at where investment should be best placed. We need to celebrate the strengths, but also identify the potential barriers and challenges to future success. David mentioned in passing ESOF, and in case you're not aware, that's the European Science Open Forum. It's a very large conference that's held in a major European city every 2 years. This summer it will be in Copenhagen. It's been awarded to Manchester for 2016. It covers not only science, technology, business, but also science policy and a wider public. It means that in 2016, Manchester will be named European City of Science. We have to make that really count, and not just for Manchester, for the region as a whole. You also heard about some of the big developments, such as investments that are coming to the Northwest. We need more of them. We need particularly to better develop the links between academia, research institutes and businesses. It is getting better. But at the Greater Manchester Business Conference last Friday, I quoted something that somebody told me the week before, which was an unfortunate quote, but it says that industry has problems and universities have departments. It's not so untrue. We have in the past tended to think this company's got a problem, we'll take their money and we'll carry on doing what we were doing before and tell them the results and hope that they're happy with it. I think there's a real spirit of change now in that partnership, in looking at problems together and looking to support them and answer those questions. We need to do a great deal more at building entrepreneurship within the region. We need to do a lot more at working with some of our smaller companies. They're very difficult to engage with in any region, but there are thousands of them in this region. And we have representatives largely from the big companies. An important thing now is to ensure that we capture the strengths across all sectors, and indeed we build on those strengths. This is a great first step. I would say it is a first step. We've got a lot more to do and a lot more to follow up. But thank you again for coming, and thank you again for those people who made such a good job of this report. Thanks.